So where we last left off on this, I was showing you how to fix the fingerprints. If you notice, there's a lot more marks in here that I'm actually drawing on. Not going to worry too much about that. And the fact that this isn't going to be exactly my fingerprint, not at all concerned about that. I am getting the major portions of it. If this were ever used to identify me, I think there's enough characteristics in here that this could be used for a fingerprint for me, but I'm really not concerned about that at all. Notice how I'm moving the screen around. I'm painting in here, hitting Command plus to increase the size of the screen so that I can get some of these details very close. I'm not super concerned about the details, but when I want to move the screen around, I'm just holding the space bar down. Notice how it turns into a little hand. And then I'm just continuing on to finish up the bottom of this fingerprint. Again, I'm not super concerned that it's absolutely accurate because I just want to get enough of it in there to put the portrait in later. And I've just taken a copy of the latest portrait for my school photo, so I can actually use my own photo for this project. I'm going to pause the video for just a minute so that I can finish this up and import the photo, and I'll show you that process in a couple of minutes. Almost done with this. Again, I just want the gist of it. I'm going to do Command 0 to put it in full screen mode. You can see that there's a lot of stuff still in here, but I'm not going to concern myself with that. If you notice, there are no tools on my screen here. If you tap the Tab key, the tools toggle on and off. If you tap the F key by itself, the letter F on the keyboard, it changes the view. So there are three different views. If you notice here on the left-hand side, the view will change as I tap the F key. This one has the full complement of the menu at the top, all of the palettes that I have open, and all of the tools. If I hit the F key again, it goes into a full screen mode where a lot of this stuff is taken away and it gives me more space to work on the screen. And then again, if I tap it one more time, it goes full screen, and here's where I can really use most of the screen to do details in here. The reason I'm filling in a lot of these gaps is because the more gap that you have, the less of the photo you will see. So I'm going to pause this for a minute and open the photograph to input it into this document. Okay, so I've imported the photo. I just took this photo with my phone. It's my class picture or my portrait for the yearbook for this year. One thing I want you to notice is that the image size on this one is 1752 pixels high. The size on this one is 2492, so I'm going to reduce this one down. But what I want to make sure I do is I'm going to crop this one so that it's mostly my face inside that area. So I'm going to tap the letter C on my keyboard to get the crop menu. And I'm going to pull this up a little bit. Pull this down a little bit. And then pull it in from side to side. Because the primary area that I want for this photo is about there. When you use the crop tool, just double click after you get it cropped the way you want it. And then tap the escape key on the keyboard. Now when I go back to image size, it's still a bit high here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do image size, And I'm going to make this about 1850 pixels, which is about 150 pixels higher than the fingerprint. Then I'm going to select everything by holding the Command key down and tapping the letter A, copying it by tapping the C, Command C, clicking back over here, and I'm going to click on my background over here on the right hand side, so that when it pastes, it's going to paste in between these two. Use the Move tool to move the photo in. Not worried about this top part where it doesn't show enough of it, because this is all going to be cropped out. Now to make it fit just a little bit better, I'm going to hold the Command key down and tap the letter T. Now I can go in and, holding the Shift key down, I can make this just a little bit better fit. I want to get as much of my face into the center of this fingerprint as possible. Now if you notice, my hair is sticking out on both sides. Since I want to fill all this area too, I'm going to leave it about like this, and then I'm going to go back to my fingerprint using the paintbrush, and I'm going to just make up this part of my fingerprint so that it covers more of this area. This is where it doesn't really matter if it's exactly your fingerprint, these areas that I'm faking in here. You can kind of see how fingerprints are drawn as we were going through there. So there's certain places where it overlaps, there's certain places where it looks like they branch off of the same area. And again, I'm just totally making all of this up. This is not part of my actual fingerprint here. But because I want to get as much of my portrait in there, I'm just filling in some of those gaps. So one other thing I want to do is I want to beef up all of these lines. So just to the right of where it says Layer 1, I'm going to double click. I'm going to get this Layer Style dialog box, and I'm going to click on Stroke. Notice how it already added the stroke. I'm going to change the stroke color so it matches this one by clicking on this. And then rather than trying to guess what the color is over here, if I move my cursor over here onto the picture and put it on the red part, it'll select the right color for me. Again, I just want the feel of the fingerprint in there. So I'm going to increase the size over here. Make sure that you have this selected. And now I can increase the size of the stroke around there to fill up more of the space. Select Enter. And now it's beefed up that area. If you want more of those areas in there, just come back in here and fill in more of the area. I'm going to reduce the brush size just a bit, 10 pixels. Remember that as I'm stroking this, it's automatically adding the outline stroke. Meaning when we went into the layer style, every time I do a stroke like this, it's going to add the outline stroke to it as well. It'll make more sense when you see it completed. So now that the face is mostly covered here, I'm satisfied that this has enough information in it to see the face. So I'm going to select this layer, go to the Magic Wand tool. If the Magic Wand tool isn't showing, notice these little triangles at the lower right corner. Click on that and hold it down, and it'll show you what other brushes are in there. I do want the magic wand, so I'm going to select that. I'm going to click on the red area, and it should select everything in that area. If it doesn't select everything, it's because it's not all attached. So one other better way to do that is to go to the Select menu at the top, choose Color Range, and then click on one of the colors. You can see a preview of it over here. I've got this cranked up all the way to 200, but I'm going to take it down to about 175. And click OK. So now with all of this area selected, here's the easy part. I'm going to turn this layer off. I'm going to click on this layer. And then when I click the layer mask down here, it should put all of that into those fingerprints. So that's the fingerprint portrait. Notice that there's still some other stuff in here that I don't necessarily want. That's because this one is still turned on. So I'm going to turn this one off. And then I'm going to add another layer to the background so that I have a white background. Click down here on the background layer that's turned off. Over here on the right hand side, click a new layer. I'm going to switch these two so that white is in the front. And with this layer selected, I'm holding the Option key down on the keyboard and tapping the Delete key. So now I have a white background with my portrait in there. If you want to see what it's going to look like, I'm going to tap the F key by itself and then hit Command 0 to zoom in. And that's pretty much the finished portrait. If you want to add just a little more depth to it, double-click this layer and watch what happens when I add a drop shadow to it. It just added a little bit more depth to it. Let me zoom in to show you the difference. If you want to play around a little bit with these filters, this is kind of a fun one, Bevel and Emboss. Click on Bevel and Emboss. It adds a little bit more of a shadow, but what you can't see, it's kind of imperceptible, is there's actually a highlight on here as well on the top. If you zoom in, you can sort of see the highlight here and the shadow there. I'm going to turn off the drop shadow for just a second. You can also make the drop shadow a little fuzzier. By clicking the spread. Dragging a little bit to the right. This is making the drop shadow bigger. The size will also make it a little bit bigger. You don't want to go too much on this. So on the size, I'm going to take it back down to 2. Clicked off on the Bevel and Emboss, but I kind of like the Bevel and Emboss look too. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Command 0. Save the file. Just Command S. Then I'm going to come over here to my Layers palette, select the Options menu over here on the right, tell it to flatten the image. Watch what happens to these layers when I flatten the image. Discard all the hidden layers, and now it's just one layer. This is pretty critical, so don't miss this part. I'm going to click File, Save As. And down here under Format, I'm going to change it to JPEG. It should automatically change this extension here. And then since this is me, I'm going to go ahead and put my first initial and last name on here. Please put your first initial and last name on yours. I still have the desktop selected, so I'm going to save that. Click OK. And then you're done. This is what you will upload to your Google Drive.